verse of the day is Proverbs 11:2, and it says, "Pride leads to disgrace, but with humility comes wisdom." The ye old pride versus humility. Pride is scary because, in my opinion, it's like the biggest hurdle to growing your relationship with God. It's the number one thing that blocks your connection with God, because pride says, I don't need God. Humility says, I need God. Pride is you focus. Humility is God focused. That's how you do life with God, right? Is knowing your need for Him and collaborating with Him. The only way you can do that is by letting Him move through you. And that only comes through a heart of humility. I've shared this before, but God gave me an acronym about a year ago when it comes to humility and wisdom. And today's verse explains that in order to gain wisdom, you have to start with humility. I think the first verse we did in this Jesus challenge was fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. And I kind of broke down what fear of God means. And fear of God is another way to say humility, because humility is also knowing your need for God, is dying to yourself and choosing to follow God's lead. So fear of God and humility are very intertwined. It makes sense because fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. And this verse today communicates that humility leads to wisdom. So going back to the acronym that God gave me, I was in a season of just asking a lot of questions about how do I overcome this? How do I take on this? How do I accomplish this dream? A lot of how questions, like how, Lord, do I hear you better? How, Lord, do I get through this relationship issue? And He dropped this acronym in my mind. As you can tell, God speaks to me in acronyms, aka the Jesus Challenge. But how? I kept asking how, and He gave me an acronym with the word how, and it's H for humility, O for obedience, and W for wisdom. And I love actually how today's verse highlights that acronym He gave me. And I think it's important because I've talked about it before, but today's scripture just reiterates the validity of the acronym. So if you're ever asking yourself, how do I do anything? Usually if you have pride, you'll be the first person to say, I got it. But when it comes to doing life with God and having a heart of humility, and humility needing to be the first thing in your life, how to do anything starts with H, humility, which will lead to you being obedient, and obedience will give you wisdom. To break it down one step further, humility is knowing your need for God, right? So that means you're going to start developing a relationship with Him. You're going to prioritize Him. You're going to put Him first. You're going to start reading His word. You're going to start learning His character. You're going to start understanding what it is He calls us to do and how He calls us to live. And in that humility and putting Him first, you're going to gain a lot of understanding about God, which is going to effortlessly lead you to obedience, because your love for God is going to grow. And if your love for God grows, your obedience does as well, because people who are obedient know that they trust God and know that they love Him, which is why obedience flows from that heart posture. So humility, relationship, reading His word, spending time with God is going to lead to your obedience. And as you follow God's lead and do the things He tells you to do, you're gonna get wisdom. You're gonna continue to get wisdom for where you're headed, wisdom for your future, wisdom for how to handle the things in your life, wisdom for how to handle everyday struggles, wisdom for the dream that you want to accomplish, wisdom for everything. I just love how today's verse is so simple, but it's so true. But with humility comes wisdom. I mean, every single day I'm praying, Lord, get rid of any pride in my heart. And I'm always wanting God to keep me humble, keep me in a heart posture of humility. And I forget who, I think it was Maddie Pruitt, who posted something about insecurity. And she highlighted how insecurity is really a form of pride because it's you focused, right? In the beginning of this message, I explained that humility is God focused, pride is you focused. And what happens when we're so us focused? It can go two different ways. It can go the arrogant, prideful, I'm better than everyone route, or it can go the I'm worse than everyone route because you're so insecure, so doubtful. But really, both of those perspectives are you focused, right? You're so focused on either you have it all under control or you have nothing under control, but you're a mess. So it's like still you focus, like I can't do it on my own. I don't have the strength. I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy. But it's still you focus, which is what causes the disconnect from God. The whole point in doing life with God and being a flawed individual and having weakness is to call on God. And in the Bible, it says God's power is made perfect in our weakness. So anytime we're weak is a perfect opportunity for God's power to come into our life and for us to see God move in our life. And so if we're feeling insecure, we're actually discrediting God's ability to move through us and God's ability to do incredible things through us. And we're not following the passage that says God's power is made perfect in our weakness. Instead, we're sitting in our weakness and moping in our weakness rather than calling on God to help make us strong in our weakness. And really, that's what he's trying to do. All of our weak moments are just indicators to run to God and to lean on him so that his power can move and groove through us. When I read today's verse, the main thing that it reveals to me is, what is my focus? Is it me or is it God? And if you constantly work on your focus on your everyday life, what are you focusing on? Your lack or the abundance that you have? That you have everything that you need or that you're lacking everything? Because God gives you everything you need. And if you don't have certain things that you think you need, are you calling on God? Are you leaning on him for those things? Are you believing in those things? Trusting God with those things? So it's all about your focus. I've said this before, but your focus is your future. If you're focusing on the lack and you think you don't have everything and you're doomed, and it can lead to the victim mentality that keeps you in an ungrateful heart posture, which actually births a discouragement and a really unmotivating feeling and can lead to depression. But if you remind yourself that you have everything you need, you're telling yourself that you have enough, which is a motivating feeling, right? And it's going to make you want to continue to move forward, because that's what a heart of thankfulness does. It actually does stuff. People don't just say be thankful to like be a good person. It's like, no, being thankful does something to your heart. The whole thought of keeping your eyes on Jesus reminds me of when Peter was walking on water and he was literally accomplishing a miracle and walking on water towards Jesus, and his eyes were on Jesus as he was walking on water. And then what happens next? He puts his eyes and turns his eyes to the waves that are really big and the storm, and he shifts his focus from Jesus to the storm, and he starts to sink. And it's a perfect analogy of what happens when we take our eyes off God. You can be walking on your miracle when you keep your eyes on God, and your circumstances could be stormy, but you can still walk through your miracle. But the moment you focus on the storm and you focus on what's around you and you take your eyes off of the one that's supposed to help lead you through, that's when you start to sink. That's when it feels overwhelming. The key is just to keep your eyes on Jesus, because that's how your miracles are going to come to life. So I would encourage you to just pray like, Lord, help me to get better at keeping my eyes on you. Help me to get better at being humble. Give me a heart of humility. Get rid of all pride. And I think that will do wonders for you. Okay?